Hello and welcome to Heidegger 1070. We just took Henry out of his collapse and now he's living again. Look at his sitting bones. He's now coming into contact with the ground, which is an absolute prerequisite. Maybe he should put his feet on the ground as well. This is the comfortable position he was formerly lying down in a torture situation with a high pulse. Most possibly high blood pressure, which is him suffering from. I had some interesting revelations from the day before about visualization, which could be a sort of a shorthand for what I'm aiming at. Andy Warhol, yeah! What on earth? I will discuss today the right hemisphere thinking, which is very unlike the left hemisphere. The left hemisphere's thinking is characterized by what the left hemisphere perceives to be words and meanings. That everything refers to something, and the idea that space somehow is prearranged in up, under, left and right. Those things are always found within the left hemisphere. And understanding thinking is purely in meanings. The right hemisphere, in contrast, is visual. But look out here, here's a problem. It's very easy to confuse what the left hemisphere think about visual, or what is truly visual. The true visual character of the right hemisphere is not something we can know because we are in the left hemisphere. But we can have some hints. Visual means the whole world in its entirety. So you compare the two thinking. This is the first hint, number one. One thinking is very diminished, it's very small. It seems to be consisting of meanings. Meanings are not something to be found in the world. The other thinking, the right hemisphere thinking, is the thinking that takes the totality of the world and the littleness in the world, the iterations and the global outtake. Everything that is in the left hemisphere can be found in the right hemisphere. The difference is in the left hemisphere it is received once from the right hemisphere and then being reused. So meanings are always different from person to person. It is not a generalized meaning, it cannot be understood by others, and I will in this lecture claim it cannot even be understood by the person having the meanings. They do not make any sense. This is a thinking that never ever ends in success, other by happenstance, random, chance. The system knows that, and when the system knows, its thinking will not lead to success and that we will not be localized. That system will put itself into fear, tense the neck, send out these 98 different hormones that regulate stress, put the system on an arm, alert. That is being on your toes. Some of the hormones like noradrenaline make, for instance, the spleen go faster. It also makes digestion more intense, sending out more acid to the stomach. It makes movement in the intestines faster, and it doesn't locate much energy to the digestive system. Why is that? What do you think, Henry? Why does the stress hormones not allocate much energy to the digestive system, your stomach, your intestines, and your colon? Your gallbladder, of course, and your pancreas.
Maybe because it's needed somewhere else.
It's needed for the flight.
For the flight, yeah.
So you don't need digestion if you are flying away from a danger. Actually, taking care of digestion could make you prey of some horrible animal. It's all down to survival, and I think one of the best ways of understanding what the fight and flight mechanism is, think about survival. What do you need for survival? You don't need to think anything new. Creativity is not a thing when a lion is around the corner. It is when you are relaxed and you have plenty of energy, security and food. So it will not be present. Does that sound like the left hemisphere? Well, I say it does actually to a certain extent. One could see the left hemisphere as the fight and flight mechanism in action, and being just the opposite of thinking, being incredibly quick, fast, speed, quick solutions. And I have a remembrance here. My memory's been gone for a long while, but I remember in school, I was amazed how my co-students, my fellow students, my friends, they were all asking so much. And for me, I thought, why not just remembering? And it felt for me as very troublesome and like annoying to having to ask so many questions. It's like a way of non-understanding. I would in this lecture assume that could actually be the left hemisphere's take. Because it doesn't understand anything, it needs to ferociously grasp. And this is 100% actual. When you are in the right mood, your hands will clutch. When in the left mood, your hands would clutch like this. This is the grasping effect. So the grasping is bodily as well. Whereas to understand, you sit balanced, comfortable, without spending any energy. It's a zero waste of energy. You don't get tired, you don't get lactic acid, mjölksyra, as we call it in Swedish. You can sit forever and ever and ever, interminably. Actually, just like horses sleeping. We cannot sleep standing up, but we can stand up like a horse for a very extended time. If you don't believe me, you can go to the Tower of London and see the beefeaters. The gods. They stand for hours. They move about every hour, but then they stand for another hour. Doesn't take them any effort. Doesn't make them tired afterwards. If you tire when you sit, something is very, very wrong. No other animal are doing things in the T2 and 2 mode. None. Zero animals. But it's especially in the Western culture, possibly 80–90% of the population do it. And that locks out understanding, knowing. So I think my intuition at that time was that all those questions made it much harder to understand anything. I will read an article that was very kindly sent to me by Jan Eiskens, my good friend in Antwerp. It is from the Journal of Sports and Science and Medicine, 3 things here. Published September 2016, and I'm going to read an extract from the pages 434 and 450. The name of the article, Effects of Mental Imagery on Muscular Strength in Healthy and Patients Participants, as Systematic Review. Some of the author, Maamer, Slimani, David Todd, Helmi Chabene, Bianca Miarca and Karim Chamari. I'll read from the abstract. The aims of the present review were to 1. Provide a critical overview of the current literature on the effects of mental imagery on muscular strength in healthy participants and patients with immobilization of the upper extremity, hand, and anterior cruciate ligament, ACL. 2. Identify potential moderators and mediators of the mental imagery. You might put that on the floor, I think.
Yes.
And the other thing, whatever that is. Maybe we should go to the trash, don't you think? Doesn't have a place.
For the fridge.
Lovely. Identify potential moderators and mediators of the mental imagery strength performance. This is new to me. Relationship, and 3, determine the relative contribution of electromyography, EMG, and brain activities, neural and physiological adaptations in the mental imagery strength performance relationship. This article also discusses the theoretical practical implications of the contemporary literature and suggests possible directions for future research. Overall, the results reveal that the combination of mental imagery and physical practice is more efficient than, or at least comparable to, physical execution with respect to strength performance. Imagery prevention intervention was also effective in reducing of strength loss after short-term muscle immobilization. The present review also indicates advantageous effects on mental internal imagery, range 2.6% to 136% for strength performance compared with external imagery, range 5 to 24%. So this is a comparison of internal mental imagery and external mental imagery. I can add there, if you are very much into the left hemisphere, you actually have to start with an external mental imagery. You cannot imagine. There cannot be any visualization if you've been into the left hemisphere for a prolonged time. You cannot reach into reality. And let me mention once more, with visualization, I mean the whole world in its totality, in its entirety. Typically, mental imagery with muscular activity was higher in the active than passive muscles. And imagining lifting a heavy object resulted in more EMG activity compared with imagining lifting a lighter object. Thus, in samples of students, novices, or youth male or female athletes, internal mental imagery has a greater effect on muscle strength than external mental imagery does. Imagery, ability, motivation, and self-efficacy have been shown to be the variables mediating the effect of mental imagery on strength performance. Finally, the greater effects of internal imagery than those of external imagery could be explained in terms of neural adaptations, stronger brain activation, higher muscle excitation, greater somatic and sensomotor activation, and physiological responses such as blood pressure, heart rate, and respiration rate. The last one I can contest to, I was in a state of utmost stress, like just described here, for 2 decades. And my breathing rhythm was just out of sync. It was the double that was needed, and it was shallow. It was the fight and flight breathing, because you don't take deep breath when you are in flight mode. They are very shallow and supposed to give nutritions to the muscle group T2 and N2. And why is that, Henry? Why does shallow breaths help T2 and N2? They consume oxygen, whereas the stable muscles, they don't need oxygen. Anyway, not to the same extent. So those are 2 entirely different systems. One system, the N2, the T2, takes sugar as its use, which is a quick energy giver, whereas the T1, N1 takes fat, lipids, as its consuming product. This is one of the reasons why we are getting fatter in modern society. That is, we consume sugar so that reserve that we have around our belly doesn't get involved anymore. And this is because we are in flight mode. We need to get away now. So the more time-consuming absorption and consumption and metabolism of lipids, fats, are not the case. Instead, we store more fat and we consume sugars. This is one of the reasons for modern time sugar cravings, the need for fast sugars, because the whole system is directed to those fast sugars. I remember when I was young, there was a campaign in Sweden, eat 6 to 8 sandwiches a day. And I think most of those sandwiches was actually fast sugars, like bread, maybe pepparkaka, or I don't know, those things. That was ridiculous, but we needed that sugar because maybe the stress started that time, 70s, 60s, I don't know. And we needed to adjust to the new way of living with sugar indicated system that needed sugar to be able to function properly. It will not function with too much protein and fat. So the whole system needs to be changed at the same time. But balancing up, which I'm trying to do now, it's a very good first start. Let me add some other ingredients into this. The visual space is often obscured. When I go into this fight and flight mode like this, I naturally block out the whole world which is around me. Taking the whole world in makes me perceptible going into the right mode once more. So we can think of the left mode as being very narrow, like the point of a needle, whereas the bigger awareness of the right hemisphere is broadened and takes everything in. And it does, in a way, not preemptively decide what is important in the other environment. Remember the bird. It's a rather good parallel that Imagery constructed. The bird needs to be having its attention on both places at the same time. The global intake, that is the whole world, so it can find predators, it can find escape routes, it can also know where it is in the world. That is of a very great importance to the bird. The second thing, with a broader awareness, it can also go into the narrow awareness of finding a seed. And finding a seed is not so much actually perceiving the seed as to have more of a preemptive understanding, a sort of a representation of something. To be clearly, this is very interesting, to clearly see something on the ground it is not enough just to perceive. I think that is one of the reasons for the left hemisphere system. It does something that the right hemisphere cannot do. This is very interesting. For instance, if you have a very, let's say, video camera, it is the police, the video camera has recorded crime scene, but the camera is of an older model, so its megapixel, its ability to take in the environment is very low. What we can do with modern computers is to make an algorithm that compares the different pixels. And this system is not seeing in the regular way. What it does instead is doing very, very complicated comparisons. But it's always based on what you want to find preemptively. You want to find a person, you want to find a person in special attire and so forth. The more you can put into this system, the clearer the image that comes out, which is going to be not a lifelike image, but more of a representation. I think that's the first time I really sort of understand what are those representations, because Henry, they're very hard to understand. What the bloody hell are representations? I've been thinking earlier, they are like dim lit, like this photo of Marilyn Monroe. But it's not really accurate. It's not a copy. It is not a transformation of reality. It is, in a way, you can use the word of Heidegger, unheimlich, not of this world. And this is the mode of the left hemisphere, and that makes it very good at finding those small things. Because those can, if you're a flying bird, you can't see those things. You use the left hemisphere calibration system or algorithmic system. We don't know actually how it works. I imagine quantum mechanics being part of it as well. But it's a different way of experience. So we need both modes. And what happened in modern society, it's either or. And the either or situation won't do for, we have two hemispheres. It means that contradiction is built into our very existence. Those are two separate aspects of reality. And they need to be complementary. And since we don't accept complementary, and since the left hemisphere is much quicker than the right hemisphere, not much more, but those milliseconds really means a lot when you're having a discussion, having an argument, or want to make quick decisions, for instance, in a stressful situation. You see here how the brain image, where you are situated, gives more stress. Because for every unfounded decision taken by the left hemisphere, you are spiraling down into more and more stress, because each decision is going to be bad. And it's like the whole system have an internal structure that actually points to the left hemisphere in a way. Once you've fallen into that, it seems to be a point of no return. I think somebody in one lecture mentioned the left hemisphere as a black hole. I don't know if you heard about the black hole, but they have something called event horizon. And you can't see it in space. But what it is, when you're approaching the black hole, you will feel its extended gravity, you will feel time even slowing down and other things. But you are still free to leave the black hole until you go to the limit. And that limit is in both in time and in space. That is called the event horizon. An excellent movie as well by Sam Harris. Do you know who Sam Harris is, Henry?
Vaguely.
He was in Tolkien's The Ring trilogy.
Yes.
He was, what's his name? The Elder Hobbit.
Bilbo?
Bilbo, yeah, he was Bilbo. I think that was Bilbo. No, sorry, no. Sam Harry was the Elf King, sorry. Left hemisphere, possibly. I think that is an actually very good example of the left hemisphere. because I couldn't see the faces. Instead, I'm doing this calculation with the representations. And I realized the actor playing Bill was very different from Sam Harris. They don't look the same in any way. This is what happened in the left hemisphere. You got uncertain. Oddly enough, this is what Heidegger describes as Zweideutigkeit, two meanings. You can't decide which way to go, and all of a sudden you have these two meanings. Can be absolutely confusing. But once you go over the event horizon, there is no return. This is one of the definite laws of physics. If you go over the event horizon, nothing in the world can take you out of the black hole. You are dead meat. And in certain aspects, the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere have the same likeness, because the more you go into the left hemisphere, the more your decisions, your perception of reality will end you into more frustrating decisions. This, not sitting with the sitting bones like this, take you out of localization. We have three organs here in the head. One organ that is having three perpendicular angles, 90 degrees, and they tell the direction or the localization of the head in space. Then we have the accelerator organs, which is small crystals that are situated in a liquid or almost a gel. They help with telling you what is up and down in a general aspect in relation to the rest of the body. And then we also have some other organ which work with hairs. These three things, if you're not localized, if you're not on your sitting bone, they will send horror into the whole body. They would put the system into alarm. An alarm system goes off. You don't know where you localize. What happens? You tense. You start tensing the T2 muscles. All the hormones, I think there are 90 of them, are sent out from the different secretional organs. They put the system on alert, and by putting the system on alert, your attention, your awareness, your ability to understand is getting diminished, and that will make you go even more into that direction. You will become tired, because after a while, after a couple of months, the T2 muscles and the N2 neurons are getting established. And then for the first time in your life, you will experience tiredness. I did that myself after I had an accident in the military. I felt that tiredness for the first time in my life, I think. I felt tiredness from exercise, but that was a pleasant tiredness. It was something that actually made me relax, made me happy. But this new tiredness was a tiredness both of mind, awareness, attention, focus, and it was a tiredness in the body that was more associated with pain. It wasn't pain, but it was in that region. Nasty feeling. And this is the actual feeling we know today. When you're sitting this way, you put everything torturous into your body system. You feel pain, the system is reacting, those 90 hormones is flushing your system, driving everything to the edge, into flight mode. Your heart is getting extra energy, your spleen is having this development, your digestive system is turned off, your muscular activity gets tensed, they get hardened. Even it has effects on the muscular, it has effects on the brain. This plays havoc on the neurons as well. At least 80% of the neurons get in the end killed off by the hormone stream, because it's a very unhealthy situation to be in a prolonged time. Wild animals like antelopes, maximum 10 minutes. Human beings, decades. I would say it's a bloody miracle that we're even alive. Decades. I think there is something amazing with humans that still makes it possible for us to be standing up after that horrendous, industrious lack of understanding and hurting of the body. An example I remember since earlier is when you shoot a deer with a gunshot, it doesn't die from the gunshot or blood loss. None of the gunshots are going into the body, not penetrating more like this. Some could go further in, but they don't go into the heart. If you're lucky, they can go into the lungs. But not unseldom what happens when you have this tremendous shock on the whole body, on the side of the body, on a big area, the animal just stops living. And of course, as a hunter, that's perfect because the animal won't move anywhere, it would stay where it is. Whereas if you shoot the heart, it will still move 10 meters until the pressure of the blood in the system, in the artery system, will be too low to support its moving well. One interesting loss here when you go into the left hemisphere is the loss of a visual memory, a loss of being able to visually perceive, experience and imagine things. Those are lost. In 2016, this new phenomenon got a name, and it's the loss of being able to visualize, to see things for your inner eye. Are there any Wi-Fi here? No. Check it out. No, doesn't seem to be any here. Should we be without the code word then?
Look at the door.
The door, sorry. Let's see here.